I want 50% of the inheritance, Jared said, leaning back in his chair with a smirk that felt rehearsed. Plus equity in your architecture firm. It is only fair. His voice echoed slightly in the sleek, glass-walled Chicago courtroom, but it was the silence that followed that was deafening. He adjusted the lapel of his Italian suit, a suit I had paid for, and looked around the room as if expecting applause. I did not blink. I did not gasp. I just stared at him from across the defendant's table, marveling at the audacity. $3.4 million from my grandmother's estate, and he felt entitled to half of it because, in his words, his lifestyle brand had built my career. My lawyer, Richard, stiffened beside me. But I placed a hand on his arm to stop him. This was not a moment for legal objections. This was a moment for observation. Jared was not just greedy. He was delusional. And looking at him now, confident and glowing in the sterile courtroom light, I realized the man I had married was not a partner. He was a parasite who had finally grown too big for the host. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community. Now, let us get into the story. To understand how I ended up in that courtroom, staring across the aisle at a man who wanted to dismantle my life, you have to understand what I do for a living. I am a restoration architect. I take things that are broken, crumbling, and forgotten, and I give them a spine of steel. I spend my days analyzing load-bearing walls and detecting rot in foundations that look perfectly fine from the outside. I am the person you call when you want to save a legacy from collapsing into dust. But the irony of being an architect is that you spend so much time building shelters for everyone else that you often forget you are standing in the rain. I met Jared 5 years ago at a gallery opening. I was 33, exhausted, and standing in the corner with a glass of lukewarm water, mentally calculating the structural integrity of the floating staircase. I was not looking for love. I was looking for an exit. That was exactly when he found me. Looking back, I realize now that it was not serendipity. It was reconnaissance. Jared did not just walk up to me. He targeted me. He had done his research. He knew who I was. He knew my firm had just landed the street, Regis contract, and most importantly, he knew I was alone. He did not use cheesy pickup lines. He walked up to me and asked about the cantilever stress on the staircase I was staring at. He spoke my language. For the next 6 months, he did not just date me. He mirrored me. There is a specific kind of blindness that affects strong, independent women. We are so used to carrying the weight of the world that when someone comes along and offers to hold our bag, it feels like a revolution. I see the blueprint clearly now. It is called love bombing, but that term feels too explosive for what Jared did. It was more like an infiltration. He studied my insecurities with the precision of a structural engineer. He saw that I was tired of being the decision maker, so he planned every date. He saw that I was insecure about my workaholism, so he praised my ambition, calling me a visionary while subtly suggesting that I needed a partner to handle the mundane parts of life so I could focus on my genius. He filled the cracks in my foundation with what I thought was gold, but was actually just expanding foam, cheap, temporary, and toxic. He told me he was a consultant for tech startups. It was vague enough to sound impressive, but nebulous enough to avoid scrutiny. He drove a leased luxury car. He wore watches that I later learned were high-end replicas. He created a character that fit perfectly into the empty space beside me. I remember the night he proposed. We were in Paris, a trip he suggested but I paid for because his funds were tied up in escrow. He looked at me with those practiced, earnest eyes and told me that he did not want to just be my husband. He wanted to be my sanctuary. I said yes. I said yes because I was an expert at spotting rot in timber, but I had no idea how to spot it in a soul. I thought I was building a life. In reality, I was handing the keys to the demolition crew. When the call from the estate lawyer came, I was in the middle of a site visit, wearing a hard hat and shouting over the sound of jackhammers. My grandmother, Eleanor, had passed away 6 months prior, but the probate process had been dragged out due to the complexity of her assets. She was a woman who did not believe in banks. She believed in land, gold, and diverse portfolios. The lawyer told me the final valuation, $3.4 million, liquid, plus the deed to her brownstone. I remember hanging up the phone and feeling a profound sense of weight. Not joy, not excitement. Weight. It was a responsibility. It was a legacy. When I told Jared that night, his reaction was instantaneous. There was no solemnity, no respect for the loss that had enabled the gain. There was only hunger. 3.4, he whispered, his eyes wide. Angela, do you know what we can do with this? I corrected him gently. I am going to invest most of it back into the firm. Upgrade our software. Maybe hire another senior architect. He waved his hand dismissively. That is small thinking, babe. You need to think about the brand. Our brand. The next morning, Jared quit his job. He did not discuss it with me. He just came home at noon, tossed his lanyard on the counter, and announced that he was ready to fully commit to managing our portfolio. I was wasting my time there anyway, he said, opening a bottle of champagne. Now I can be your silent partner. I will handle the investments, the networking, the lifestyle. You just keep drawing your little blueprints. I felt a prick of irritation at little blueprints, but I pushed it down. Maybe he was right. Maybe I needed help. I was drowning in work, and having someone manage the finances seemed like a relief. That relief lasted exactly 3 weeks. It started with the car. A matte black luxury SUV that cost more than my first year's salary. It is for networking, he argued, when I saw it in the driveway. You cannot pull up to a client meeting in a Honda and expect them to trust you with a $10 million restoration. Then came the investments. Jared became obsessed with NFTs and crypto. He spent hours on Discord channels, talking about yield farming and floor prices. He transferred $45,000 from our joint account, money I had earmarked for payroll, into a digital wallet. When I confronted him, he did not apologize. He patronized me. You do not understand the future, Angela, he said, scrolling through his phone. This is market research. I am building a diversified portfolio for the firm. You focus on the bricks, let me focus on the cloud. 2 weeks later, the project he invested in was rug pulled. The $45,000 vanished overnight. I sat him down at the kitchen table, the bank statement between us. This has to stop, I said, my voice steady. You are not a financial advisor. You are gambling with my family's legacy. Jared looked at me with cold, dead eyes. Your family's legacy? Who do you think got you the Street Regis contract? Who do you think charmed the board at the gala last month? You are the talent, Angela, but I am the engine. Without my connections, you would still be fixing porches in the suburbs. I am not gambling. I am earning my share. The line between greed and sabotage is thin, and Jared crossed it on a Tuesday. I came into the office early to review the schematics for a new restoration project in the Gold Coast. My studio was quiet, the drafting tables empty, the hum of the servers the only sound. As I walked past the conference room, I noticed a folder left on the table. It was not one of ours. It was a pitch deck titled Vanguard Living. I opened it. It was a business plan for a boutique architecture firm specializing in modern luxury rehabilitations. The aesthetic was a direct rip-off of my signature style. But what made my blood run cold was not the design theft. It was the personnel list. Under proposed senior architects, I saw the names of my 2 most promising junior associates. And under principal founder, I saw Jared's name. He was not just gambling my money. He was trying to poach my team. He was using my capital, the money from my grandmother, to build a competitor that would cannibalize my own firm. I did not scream. I did not confront him. Those reactions belonged to a wife who is heartbroken. I was an architect witnessing a structural failure. I closed the folder and walked into my office. I sat down at my desk and stared at the city skyline, feeling a strange, icy calm settle over me. This was not a marriage anymore. It was a hostile takeover. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I had saved years ago but never used. Richard, I said when he answered. It is Angela. We need to talk. Richard was a shark. He did not believe in amicable separations. He believed in autopsies. We met for lunch at a steakhouse where the waiters knew not to interrupt. I laid out everything: the inheritance, the car, the crypto loss, the pitch deck. You have a prenup, right? He asked, cutting into his ribeye. Yes, I said. We signed it 5 years ago. He barely looked at it. Good, Richard said. But we need more. If he is trying to poach your staff and use your funds for a competing business, that is a breach of fiduciary duty if he is acting as your manager. We need to document everything. Every text, every email, every transaction. We are going to build a cage around him, Angela, and we are going to let him walk right into it. That night, I went home and cooked dinner. I asked Jared about his day. I smiled when he talked about his big plans for the future. I think we are really close to a breakthrough, babe, he said, pouring himself a glass of my vintage red. I can feel it. I can feel it too, I said, sipping my water. Under the table, my phone buzzed with a notification from the security app I had installed on his laptop while he was in the shower. It was a log of his keystrokes. I was watching him build his own coffin, one lie at a time. The courtroom air was so still I could hear the hum of the ventilation system. Jared sat across from me, radiating the kind of confidence that only comes from profound ignorance. His lawyer, a man who clearly charged by the syllable, stood up to make his closing argument. Your Honor, he began, gesturing grandly towards Jared. While my client may not have contributed financially in the traditional sense, his intangible contributions, his networking, his lifestyle curation, his brand, were the catalyst for Miss Angela's success. He was the wind beneath her wings. I saw the judge, a woman with eyes like flint, suppress a grimace. When it was my turn, I did not make a speech. I stood up, smoothed the front of my blazer, and walked to the bench. I placed a single, thick envelope on the judge's desk. What is this? The judge asked. Evidence, Your Honor, Richard said from beside me, of a prenuptial agreement signed 5 years ago, stipulating total separation of assets. Jared laughed, a short, sharp bark of amusement. That old thing? I did not even read it. It is void. Duress, or whatever. The judge opened the envelope. She pulled out the prenup, her eyes scanning the signatures. Then she pulled out the second document I had included. It was a printout from my home security system, a log of digital activity from our shared home network, dated 3 weeks prior. And this? The judge asked, holding up the log. That, Richard said, his voice slicing through the room, is a record of Mr. Jared attempting to access my client's private digital vault. Specifically, the folder labeled Legal Documents. He tried 27 different password combinations. He knew the prenup existed, Your Honor. He was trying to find it and delete it. Jared's smirk vanished. It did not fade. It was deleted. His face went slack. He looked at his lawyer, then at me, then at the judge. The realization hit him like a physical blow. I had not just protected myself, I had baited a trap, and he had walked right into it. The judge looked at Jared over the rim of her glasses. She did not speak for a long moment. Then, she let out a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was far more devastating. It was a scoff. Mr. Jared, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. It appears your lifestyle curation did not include basic cybersecurity. Your Honor, Jared's lawyer stammered. This evidence is inadmissible. My client. Your client, the judge interrupted. Her voice sharp as glass, committed digital trespassing. But let us return to the matter of assets. She turned back to the prenup. Jared was still frozen, his mouth slightly open, a look of pure, unadulterated cognitive dissonance on his face. It was not just fear. It was a system failure. His brain, wired to believe he was the protagonist of every story, could not compute a reality where he was the villain who got caught. He looked like a computer trying to divide by zero. According to Clause 14, the judge read, all debts incurred individually during the marriage remain the sole responsibility of the individual. She picked up another stack of papers from the envelope, the credit card statements I had compiled. Mr. Jared, she said, looking over her glasses, you have accumulated $105,000 in personal debt, the leased luxury vehicle. the failed crypto investments, the credit cards maxed out on lifestyle expenses. You assumed these would be absorbed by the marital estate? Jared nodded dumbly. We were partners. Not according to this, she said, tapping the prenup. This court rules that the prenuptial agreement is valid. Miss Angela retains 100% of her inheritance and her business equity, and you, sir, retain 100% of your debt. She banged the gavel. The sound was like a gunshot in a library. Case closed. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy. Jared slumped in his chair, the golden boy facade dissolving into gray, panicked reality. He was not a partner. He was not a co-founder. He was just a man with a leased car he could not afford and a debt he could not pay. As I stood up to leave, I looked at him one last time. He did not look back. He was staring at the table, his world collapsing inward. I walked out of the courtroom, my heels clicking on the marble floor, a rhythm of absolute, unshakable freedom. The collapse of Jared's empire was swift and public. When the court transcripts were released, because Richard, in his infinite wisdom, ensured they were part of the public record, Jared's personal brand disintegrated. The investors he had courted for his spin-off firm vanished. The junior architects he tried to poach came back to me, apologizing profusely, claiming they were manipulated. I did not fire them, but I did not trust them either. Trust, once broken, requires a complete teardown to rebuild. Jared moved back in with his parents. His leased SUV was repossessed. The last I heard, he was trying to sell consulting services on LinkedIn, but his reputation was radioactive. He sent me a few emails, long rambling screeds about how I had ruined his potential. But I never replied. I just forwarded them to Richard and let the legal system handle the rest. I did not keep the money he tried to steal. I did not want it. It felt tainted, like timber infested with termites. Instead, I took the exact amount he had demanded, plus the value of the debt I had avoided, and I created something new. The Eleanor Scholarship. It was not just a fund, it was a lifeline. I designed it specifically for women escaping financial abuse, providing them with the resources to rebuild their lives from the ground up. Legal aid, housing, education. I named it after my grandmother because she taught me that a legacy is not just what you leave behind. It is what you build while you are still here. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I stood on the roof of a new project site, the wind whipping my hair. I looked out at the city, at the skyline I was helping to shape. I was not just an architect anymore. I was a sower. I had taken the poison Jared tried to feed me and turned it into fertilizer for a garden he would never be allowed to enter. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who built shelters for everyone but herself. She was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood that the most important structure you will ever build is your own self-worth. And this time, the foundation was solid. If you believe that protecting your peace is the highest form of self-love, hit that like button and share this story. Someone out there needs to know they can walk away too.